Hey everyone! So sometimes a debate comes up when we talk about no-touch techniques. And I think as my audience, as you follow my work, probably you know that I like to question things. And I definitely threw no-touch techniques through the window. I'm not a believer that it works. Interesting enough, there are a lot of people who do believe that it does work. Some people do even believe it's a legitimate self-defense, form of self-defense, which I think is really crazy, but you know, we live in a delusional world. But nevertheless, what is interesting about no-touch techniques, that to a degree, they do have something behind it. There's a certain systematic approach, a certain explanation to it, why people believe that it works, and that it does take some mastery to be able to perform it. And by no means I'm not a no-touch technique master or anything, but through learning Aikido, since sometimes you do see no-touch techniques in Aikido, I was exposed to how it works, and I did some exercises to work on it. So I have a conceptual understanding and a bit of practice understanding what's really behind it and why people believe that it works, and just the whole thing. So I decided it might be interesting for you to see that take and look at the no-touch techniques. For that reason, I invited my wife to help me out as always, since she likes to kick my butt. So I invite my wife again. She's coming. So we're gonna do this together. Now what's very interesting, as I will break it down and explain to you how I perceive that the no-touch techniques work, you will see that the fact that my wife is a skeptical person, she really has a good bullshit radar, she's not gonna be the perfect person to pick it up, and I'm gonna have to kind of construct the whole exercise around her. But anyway, I'll just explain to you what I mean. So let's take a simple Aikido exercise. We stand in a mirror stance, the funny life of Aikido. So I'm gonna have to ask my wife to switch her legs, right? And she's gonna grab with a mirror hand, my hand, right? So now I will ask her to give some intention. So if she invites me with her hand, she gives me her hand, I step in, I try to grab, and if she moves away, if she moves away, I follow, right? So a very, very cooperative, very specific exercise, where no-touch techniques is the only place it works. She grabs me, and if I go, follow with your whole body if I move. Right, exactly. So now I have her intention. And now I'm gonna start to teach her a pattern, a cooperative pattern, which I'm gonna ingrain into her brain, into her memory. So she's grabbing the hand, I switch the hands, I grab her, and now I'm gonna come in with the body, and I will go in, and now she's a hardcore woman, so she's resisting. If she would train Aikido, and I'm sure she wouldn't, because she would say, why the heck should I do this? But as she does that, as an instructor, I say to her, so now you have to receive this. You don't want to get hit with my hand, so yes, so you receive. There, right? So now I taught her a cooperative Aikido technique, and we repeat this technique. And she moves towards me, I re-grab, I come in, and I move. And now since she's learning and she's getting a hang of what's happening, there's contact. I touch her and I move, and whenever I touch, she moves back. But with time, she starts to realize and memorize this technique, and she's like, okay, I know this pattern. So now she's gonna expect that my arm is going to be there, and she may start to move. She may start to move early. And while this may take time for this habit to develop, I'm gonna force it through right now. I'm gonna ask her to do that, but pretty much the same applies. So now, as she moves, grabs my arm, and I move in with my arm, and I do the technique, and bam, she moves, right? And now we're in this nice flow, cooperative flow. And then as we progress, that distance becomes greater and greater, and she picks up the sign of what I'm gonna do even earlier. So she moves, and now she can move even earlier, right? And eventually what starts to happen, we get into this pattern of cooperation and just syncing with each other so much that she picks it up super early. I start to believe in this, like, oh, look, this technique works. You know, I can do this without a touch. And I'm gonna make a separate video about this. I'm gonna talk about this more in depth, about how this can even trick a master practitioner. He starts to believe, there are stories where people start to believe that it works. But basically it's just a cooperative pattern that we're so used to that it happens without a touch. So as I move in and she does this circle, I'm like, I start to move early because I'm receptive. I know very well what's gonna happen. My body knows the movement of receiving. And so as I'm very sensitive to this motion, I'm gonna really pretty much overreact. So I go and she does the movement, and damn. And now this belief starts to kick in. Oh, look, I did this technique without a touch. And when you learn thousands and thousands of patterns, when you keep on repeating them, eventually a teacher, together with his students, they get so much into sync that the students overthink, overfeel, overreceive, and the master just barely moves, and the students do the same response. The master knows what movement to do to provoke that response. The student knows how to respond to that movement, and suddenly you see these masters just moving around with their hands and people receiving. And now the last thing which is very interesting here, if I cut the pattern, so where I meant in the beginning I said it takes some mastery, so yes, you need to really show, oh, this is the technique that's going to happen. I need to transmit this motion, this idea. If I do a different pattern, so she moves, and I do this, she's like, oh, that didn't work. I'm like, and I can start to think, okay, so I didn't get into my key, I didn't get into my energetic mode, and that's why she didn't respond. I need to open up more, I need to be more energetic, and she moves in. If I do the same pattern which she's used to, now she knows how to respond, she responds. If I don't, if I do something weird like this, okay, she didn't respond, right? Because she doesn't know the pattern. But if we would work on that pattern again and again, the same would apply. So basically, in a summary, this is the way I perceive the no-touch techniques. That is just a really in-sync work of a student and a teacher, or a teacher and a believer who's oversensitive, who just really responds to the smallest motions which are ingrained in the brain as a certain pattern of motion, and it's just repeated and provoked by these motions, by these movements. And if an MMA fighter comes, or someone who has no belief in that whatsoever, he's not trying to over-respond to the motions of the master, but he's just there to do his fighting. That's when it doesn't work. If a person has no belief, he's not interested to work together with the teacher, it's not going to work. And this is why by no means no-touch techniques are anywhere useful for self-defense, because if somebody is going to attack you rough in the street, they're going to go full on at you, and they're not going to look at your nice motions and whatever you want to transmit to that person through kind of a psychological approach. So this is my take. I am 90%, okay, I'll be humble and I'll say I'm 95% sure that this is exactly how it works. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Do you agree with this idea, with this interpretation of the no-touch techniques, that this is what they're about? Do you think no-touch technique work and it's just me who doesn't get it and I'm a skeptical person, and etc., etc.? I'm curious to know. And as always, I wish you to own your journey.